Recording through headset. Okay, right. So, I'm not sure if this is going to be a root video or a nugget video. I'm going to call it the root video. Okay. So, I've just had this idea for a video that I think it's going to work out to be a nice root video. And I decided to call it The Success of Success. So, today I would like to talk to you about something that I've believed in for a long time. It's a concept, it's an idea. And I call it the success of success. Okay, I started thinking about that many years ago when I set up this course. You know, this private English course, this personalized English course, a course that I created, that I designed it to tailor to students' specific needs. So as I was saying, a course that I designed, that I created to tailor to students' specific needs. So this idea was born out of my own frustration with my computer science course. When I was a student at university, in my very first year in college, you know, I did, in Brazil we call it computer science. I guess the equivalent of the course I did in English, if we were to think of if I were to think of a course which is equivalent to what we call computer science in Brazil, I guess we would call it systems engineering. Well, whatever the name is, okay? I went to college to study computer science. And in my very first year, I was very excited about doing this course because I thought, oh, this is going to be awesome. You know, I like working with computers. I like working with technology. But to be honest, what happened to me, perhaps I could say maybe I should take responsibility for it, because actually there was a bit of a misconception on my part, because I didn't know exactly what a computer science course in Brazil was like, because to me, it was about learning about computers. It was about learning how to use computers to, you know, to develop software, to develop digital products, if you will. I don't know. Anyway, my course is pretty much based on the theory of computation, if you will. There's a lot of theory behind computer science. Anyway, I was a bit disappointed, but my biggest disappointment will happen in the very first year, in the very first term, when we had a subject called Introduction to Computing. And basically, we were so that would be our first experience with programming. You know, we would learn the basics of programming. And my experience there was very frustrating, because I had never done that in my life. I had never written a piece of code. And I remember the teacher administering this course. Well, I didn't like her didactic technique at all, because she spent hours and hours and hours and hours of class just talking about theory without giving us any practical experience. And we had a computer lab, we had access to computer. So, I mean, every lab, we were, how can I put it? Well, we had a good internet, we had access to the internet in the lab. The internet back then was not what it is today, of course. I mean, we didn't have all the resources, but the internet was already there. We had an email account and everything. So my point is, okay, I think I'm rambling on here. Let me just get to the point. My point is, now this teacher spent a lot of time just talking about computer science, about programming and so on, and giving us very little experience. And then when she did allow us to use the computer, most students experienced a lot of frustration because we didn't know, for instance, we didn't know how to write a line of code and how to get the program to execute that code. You know, in computer science, I mean, in the computer world, if you Google this, you know, you learn that for every language, you know, every computer language, the basic, the simplest program in the world, it's called Hello World, the Hello World program, which is basically a text line. So you write a number of lines of code, just a few lines actually, because this is the simplest of all programs, right? And then you run the program, and basically you write a program that prints on the screen the message, Hello World. Well, I'm sharing here with you guys my experience, my frustration, because I did not have the pleasure of enjoying that moment of writing the simplest computer program in the world in the language that we were using at the time, which was Object Pascal. It's just a computer language. Because my teacher failed to do that. She failed to realize how important it would be for us. Because you see, I think that there's a psychological element to it. You know, when you are teaching anything to anybody, if you give them frustration first as opposed to success, chances are that people are gonna feel inclined to give up. You know, you get frustrated and then you just end up give up. And I think it's so simple, you know. I think all you have to do is to do this. I mean, teach your students the basics, you know, show them the basics and allow them to experience joy with the basics, you know. So why? I mean, and then I think you can apply this to any topic. Suppose you're teaching cooking, right? Instead of teaching your students the most sophisticated meal first, because they're gonna screw up. I mean, because they have no experience. But if you give them this opportunity, you know, to enjoy satisfaction, to enjoy success first, you know. For instance, teach them how to fry an egg. You know, don't teach them how to make a lasagna first. Teach them how to fry a bloody egg. So anyway, I mean, that was my experience with computer science, and that had devastating effects on my academic life, because, you know, I think I became not only frustrated, but I guess I could even say that somehow I became a little bit traumatized, you know, because I failed, you know, in the first portion of the course, you know, to write programs and to do them efficiently. And I don't know, I struggled with the interface, I struggled with the language, and from that point on, it was downhill for me, you know. It was really, really bad. So then, okay, I didn't know what kind of impact that would have on me later on in my life, in other things, you know, that I would do, you know, professionally, and on my personal life as well. But I did learn this lesson, you know, about success and failure. And then I developed this I don't know, I think something we might call this. I think we could say that I developed this feeling towards failure. That failure can have devastating effects. But if you give people, if you allow them to enjoy a little bit of success, chances are that they're gonna want more. So, for instance, with my computer code, I wrote, if I had in the very first class, if I had succeeded in writing the Hello World program, I'm sure I would come to the second class thinking, oh my God, I can do it, because I've done already the first part. But because I had failed with the very first instruction, that had an impact on my self-esteem, as a student. Okay, well then later, as you know, I have always been passionate about the language. I've always loved learning and studying and teaching English. So then I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about how I could apply this principle to language teaching. Okay, and then at first this became a selling line to me. Every time people came to my school looking for an English class, I would tell them, okay, so here you go. So do you want to know what is the basis of our work here? Well, we work like this. And then I would look into my new prospects, a new potential student. I would look into their eyes and say, look, let's say, for instance, because, that's another thing. I over the years, I had lots of people coming to me looking for an English course and saying, well, Fredo, I have to study English, but I don't really like to study English. I don't, and English is not a language that I like. I don't find it pleasant to study it, but I need to learn this language because it's important, especially for my professional life. And then I would look into this person's eyes and I would say, well, see, let me explain something to you. Now, one of my first jobs as your teacher in this course is not gonna be to teach you English. Teach, really teach you stuff, structure, grammar, vocabulary, and so on. Now, my first job is to work with you and work with the language in a way that every class we get to a point where you can say, little by little, you can say, well, teacher, I think I hate English a little bit less today. And we're going to keep doing that up to a point that you might say, I don't hate it anymore. For me, it's okay now. I'm okay with the language. I'm okay with the language. And then in the process, I would explain to these people, I would explain to them that that our philosophy, our working motto would be to do something like this. Once you start studying with me, we're gonna make every effort we can possibly make to maximize in your learning experience with us. We're going to maximize success, and we're going to minimize frustration to the best of our abilities. That's what we're going to do. We're going to maximize success, and we're going to minimize. Because let's take listening, for instance. Listening can be a very frustrating experience for learners when they're in the early stages, in the early stage of the process of learning a language. Because if you're listening to me, it's because you follow this channel and you want to improve your listening. I don't know how much of what I say here you understand. Some of my followers understand 100% of what I say. Some of them follow me because they feel that they don't understand everything, but every new video that I post, they understand more and more. And they find that this experience is constructive, it's helping them. So anyway, back to listening. So listening and not understanding can be very frustrating. So it can be very frustrating if you do it on your own. But also, for instance, if you're watching something with your family, you know, or with I don't know, with a boyfriend, a girlfriend, with somebody else, especially when this person have a better understanding of the language than you, and they understand, you know, a joke or something, and they laugh, and you feel like you've been left out because you could not understand the joke, you could not understand what was said. It's frustrating. It is frustrating, okay? So in class, as a teacher, what can we do, okay, to overcome that? Well, it's very simple. Well, first of all, we have to choose carefully what kind of material, okay? So as a teacher working with you, it's very important for me to be careful, you know, when I choose what kind of listening material or listening exercise I'm going to expose you to. Well, because I know where you are. I know what your listening skills are like. And if I push too hard, you know, if I give you something too difficult, you're not going to understand much. And you're going to feel frustrated. On the other hand, if I give you something that I think is within your spectrum, you know, in other words, it's within the range, you know. The level of difficulty is within your listening skills, abilities, limitations, or whatever we want to call it, okay? So in other words, if I give you something that I know you can manage, and then at the end of the exercise, and if I can ask you some questions, and you know, and let's say we're going to work with numbers, okay? It's very important that upon finishing the listening activity, right, I have a number of questions for you. And ideally, you should be able to answer with a certain degree of confidence, at least, you know, 60% of the questions that I have for you. Because anything below that is going to make you feel frustrated. So you see what do you understand what I'm saying? It is very important that we work, I mean, respecting this psychological element. Because first of all, if I exposed you to something which is beyond your listening skills right now, and if I ask you questions that simply because of the nature of those questions, some questions I can complicate on the way I formulate questions. I can I can ask questions that are more they're more difficult to answer because it's more difficult to elaborate on the topic, you know. And there are questions that are more direct, you know. I mean, for instance, when we start with students at lower levels, we can work with them in terms of what we call yes/no questions, you know. So you expose them to facts and then just ask simple yes/no questions. So did character A buy a car? Yes, he did. No, he didn't. Okay, so you start with something like that. And then as you feel that your student's level of confidence grows, then you increase the level of difficulty. Okay? So in other words, you offer your student, you give your student more chances to enjoy success. So, and the more success you have, the more success you want. So, you kind of, I don't know, you kind of create in your students that eagerness for more. He's gonna be hungry for more listening. And that's it. This is what I mean by the success of success. Recording through USB mic. Good morning. Okay. So guys, carry on. Yesterday, I started making that video about that I entitled "The Success of Success," and then today I would like to try to continue that one. So I had gotten to the point where I was saying that I had been very frustrated with my university course when I did computer science because I had no experience with programming, and basically what the course offered me was frustration, because in my very first attempt at writing code, I failed because I was not familiar with the language. I was not familiar with the syntax of the language, and I wasn't familiar with anything. And so it was a very frustrating experience, because the software interface that I was using, the programming environment that I was using would crash. I mean, we are talking about something that people used, a platform available 20 years ago. So what was available 20 years ago? I guess we could say the software was not as intelligent as it is today. So anyway, if you forgot to type a comma, for example, or something like that, or I don't know, just any character, the system would crash. This was very common. And so I remember sometimes the computer would crash to a degree that the only way out of it was by rebooting it. Okay, but my point is, this can be a very frustrating experience. Actually, it's something that I've said over the years. Computers are very frustrating machines. Anyway, I don't want to carry on, to digress too much on this subject. The computer thing, my experience with computer programming is just supposed to be an example. And the interesting thing is that I never thought that experience would have an impact on the way I would teach English later. So as I was saying yesterday, later on, when I began teaching English professionally, I opened my school and I started teaching. I remember I used to talk to people on their assessment interview. The first time I assessed their level, I remember I used to tell them, look, my first job here, because lots of students reported to me, stated how much they hated the language, because a lot of people need to study English, but not everybody likes English. Not everybody enjoys studying it as much as I did, for example, when I was, a kid or a teenager or something. Okay, and then I had this idea, and then I had this idea to apply this concept. And then I told my prospects, I told these people that came looking for an English course. I said to them, look, my first job as a teacher is not going to be to teach you grammar, vocabulary, expressions, and things like that. Now, my first job is to conduct a class in a way that at the end of every session you can say, oh, teacher, I think I hate English a little bit less today. And I used to say to my students, we're going to do this systematically, every day, in every class, every time you come here. That's my goal, to get you to say that at the end of each class, that you hate a little bit less. Till we get to the point where you might say, I don't hate it anymore. So that's what I believed in at the time. Well, and I still believe in it. So then, in the process, I would also explain to my new students, and I actually say this, I always say this to my current students as well. I tell them, listen, in every class, our job is to offer you more experiences of success than frustration. So let me try to say that again. So I told them that it would have to be a premise of our work that we would look after, that we would seek to achieve in every lesson more success than face frustration. So for instance, if I were to give you a listening exercise, I would do something that I could be sure that, for instance, if I showed you, let's say, 10 minutes of a film, that at least 6 minutes of that film would be clear to you. So my metric was like this. We've got to have at least 60% success and no more than 40% and no more than 40% failure. And then when I prepared interpretation questions or vocabulary exercises and things like that, we would still do the same. I would design it in a way that you would get at least 60% success and no more than 40% failure. And why did I have that in mind? Because I thought that if at the end of the day you could always say, oh no, I had more success than failure today. Well, I strongly believe in that. That at the end of every class you would go away with a hint, with a feeling, with a desire to come back and have more of that and experience that. In other words, more joy than failure, more success than failure. That's what I believed in. And I've been doing this for a long time. Okay. So think about this. So I decided to record this video. I decided to make this video. Well, first of all, because I strongly believe in this principle. Okay, I suppose that we can call this a principle. I strongly believe in this principle. And I think this applies to anything. You know, for instance, if I don't teach music, of course, and I don't play any instrument. But for example, I'm 100% sure, I'm sure that, for example, if I could teach guitar playing, you know, if I could help people learn how to play guitar, I'm sure that if at the end of the first class, if I could give you the instrument and say, play it, you know, just play something, I'm 100% sure that you would feel happy. You know, like if I could give you the instrument and say, okay, now that you've learned a few keys, a few notes, I want you to play, and then you play, and then you know that those sounds that you're producing are coming from the strings, but you are actually touching the strings. The strings. You're making it happen. So I think that gives you I think the word we're looking for here is empowerment. I think it empowers you. You know, it shows you, it gives you that feeling you've got the power. And I think that's a very strong message. You know, when you can say to yourself, I've got the power. So there's a song, by the way, a song from the 80s or from the 90s, which was very popular. And I'm gonna play a little bit here for you. I got the power. So it gives you that sense, you know, the sense that you could feel that, you could feel empowered. So anyway, and then how can we link that to your practice with the language, okay? And that comes the next step. The next step is this. If you, for instance, okay, so let's say I convince you that you should, because you really want to learn the language, that we should pick up a series, a TV show, anything, okay, which is available nowadays online or perhaps even on YouTube or something. So let's say I managed to convince you that you should watch that on a regular basis, and you start doing that. You start watching something on a regular basis, and then like we find your favorite series, you know, because you like the show, you like the story, you like the actors, and so on. Right. So the next step is this: is to identify how connected you feel with the material, right? How much you identify with the story, with the series, with the characters. But most importantly, how compatible that thing is with your listening skills, your current listening skills. Because, for example, if you pick something which is because you know we have to be careful when we say, oh, it's very dangerous. So it's we have to be careful when we say we have. Let me say that again. You have to be careful when you're selecting the series that you're going to watch, because depending on where you are, okay? Depending on what your level is like at the moment. You may find yourself in a situation in which you picked up a series, right? You selected, you've chosen a series. But either because of the content, the context, or because of the language they use, okay, I don't know, could be something more technical or more specific, and your English at that point is very basic. So what happens is that in every episode, there's so much more that you can't understand, as opposed to how much you understand of the episode. Well, and that's the first mistake that you're making, because you see, you're allowing yourself to be exposed to much more frustration than success. Chances are that you're gonna feel frustrated and give up. Okay, so my contention is that you're going to feel I would like to use the word discouraged. I think you're going to feel discouraged, and pretty soon you're going to give up. You're going to give up on your little project. The project of acquiring the language through series. You're listening. You want to improve your listening, but you're going to stop. You're going to stop practicing it because it's frustrating. On the other hand, if you pick up a series that you enjoy, and you choose the right material, because the language they use is not so difficult. There are characters that speak very, very clearly. And every time you watch, you feel that it's building up. Every time you watch, you feel that you understand more and more. And that is really an awesome experience. So that's what I want for you. I want you to have that. And I promise you, if you do that, the more you do that, the more successful you're going to feel. Okay. So, picking up from where we left off. So that's the reason why I decided to call this video The Success of Success. Because you see, the success you enjoy when you're watching and understand will have a direct impact on your success with the language, with your success with the process of learning the language. So think about it. Of course, my opinion is biased because, it's my opinion. Okay? But think about this. I want to see if I can. I'd say, I'm not sure if the right word here is convinced you. But try to think of the logic of this statement. The more success you have, the happier you feel. The more joy you enjoy, the more joy you feel. So, and the more you have that, the more you want to have. So the success of listening to something the success of watching and understanding something will encourage you to do more, to watch more. And in turn, it's going to help you to learn more about the language, become more proficient in the language. So that's why I think it makes sense to call this video the success of success. The success you have watching the video will have a direct impact on your success with the language. I think you should give this thought, give this idea, give it a chance. You know, I think you should give this concept some thought. Just think about it. Think about the logic of it. Think about your past experiences learning something. And if you will, forget English for a moment, okay? So you're learning the language, but forget this for a moment. Think about your past experiences. Think about something different that you learned. Or perhaps think about something that you do really well. And try to remember the time when you were learning this, if that didn't happen to you, that you started learning and you started enjoying more success than frustration in the very beginning. And if this idea can resonate with you, which I think will, just apply it to learning English. You know, if you, for example, think, because sometimes, you know, like I said in the beginning, there are people who have to learn the language, they need to learn the language, but they hate. So question yourself about where this hatred comes from. Ask yourself, why is it that you hate the language? And you might come to this conclusion, that the reason why you hate it now, it's because your earlier experiences with the language. It's because your earlier experiences with the language were very frustrating ones. But that can change. So if you identify with us, with our proposal here, with our way of working with the language, with our way of teaching the language, and especially with these concepts, these principles that we'd like to work with, stay here with us. You know? Give some thought. So anyway, as I said earlier to you, and I strongly believe that, so I promise you that if you do this, that if you do this systematically, if you do this on a regular basis, there's a very good chance that you're going to start experiencing a completely, well, I promise you that if you start doing this, you know, if you start, okay, and then to sum up, here's my message to you. I really believe that if you apply the concept I try to explore with you in this video, chances are you're gonna start having a completely different experience with the language. See you in our next video. Bye for now.